That's why people relapse even when they know better. It's not because they're weak or because they've forgotten how bad it gets. It's because the pain underneath is still alive. And without a better solution, the old one starts whispering again.
You've tried to quit before. Maybe it worked for a while. Maybe it didn't. But deep down, you know sobriety isn't just about not drinking. It's about finding peace, purpose, and finding yourself again. Welcome to the Sober and Happy Podcast. Each week, Tim shares hard-earned lessons from his own decade of recovery, real talk, real methods, and the mindset that helped him turn the fight of sobriety into a life he actually loves. This is the Sober and Happy Podcast. Now, here's your host, Tim Phillips.
You know, when people talk about why they can't stay sober, the reasons always sound different, but underneath, they're all pieces of the same story. Someone says, I just don't have enough willpower. Another says, I always end up hanging out with the wrong crowd. Or, I just hate feeling everything all the time. My life is too stressful. Or the classic, I'm fine until something bad happens. And I get it. I told myself those same stories too. I thought my problem was that I needed to be stronger, more disciplined, or maybe I was just more broken than everybody else who could drink normally. My first real attempt to get sober was when I was 20. I woke up on my 20th birthday in jail, facing some pretty serious charges from the night before. I could still remember sitting there on that cold bench thinking, this is what happens when you drink. In that moment, the decision to quit felt obvious. I thought I finally understood the problem. I told myself, okay, I just need to stop drinking and then my life will get better. But about 30 days later, everything in my life was falling apart. My grades in college were slipping. My anxiety and depression were at scary levels. My social life was completely gone. And all the joy I thought sobriety was supposed to bring, it just wasn't there. I felt empty. I felt miserable. And that's when this new thought hit me, one that felt just as clear and logical as the first. See what happens when you stop drinking? And just like that, the decision to start drinking again felt just as obvious as the decision to quit had been a month earlier. Looking back now, I could see exactly what went wrong. I thought alcohol was the problem, but the truth is alcohol was my solution, my way to finally relax, to quiet the anxiety, to shut down the paralyzing fear of rejection that had been running my life for as long as I could remember. And that's where most of us go wrong. We think we're fixing the problem when really we're just ripping away the only thing that we found that numbs it. We try to stop drinking without ever understanding what drinking was doing for us. But here's the obstacle most of us ignore. You can't solve a problem you don't understand. If you only look at the surface, the alcohol, the hangovers, the relapses, the guilt, you'll keep treating symptoms and wonder why you never feel better. The real healing starts when you're willing to dig into what's underneath. Because the problem isn't that you can't stop drinking. It's that you haven't yet understood what drinking was trying to fix. When I look back on that time, it's obvious now. I wasn't addicted just to alcohol. I was addicted to relief. I was addicted to the way that drinking made the noise stop. That's the real equation behind addiction. Pain plus misunderstanding equals repetition. Let me say that one more time. Pain plus misunderstanding equals repetition. We drink because we're in pain, emotional, mental, or spiritual, and we don't understand where it's coming from or what to do with it. So we find something that takes away that pain, even just for a little while, and we repeat it over and over. That's why people relapse even when they know better. It's not because they're weak or because they've forgotten how bad it gets. It's because the pain underneath is still alive. And without a better solution, the old one starts whispering again. The problem is we've built most of the recovery culture around the wrong target. We teach people to fight cravings instead of understanding them. We tell them to avoid triggers instead of exploring what those triggers are trying to reveal. We focus on managing behavior when what really needs healing is the belief. the story that we tell ourselves about who we are and what we need. And even in traditional recovery programs, you could see this misunderstanding play out. Take the old phrase, meeting makers make it. Now, I'm not against meetings or community, far from it. Support is powerful and necessary. But when we start to believe that the meeting itself is what keeps us sober, we're just trading one dependency for another. That's why you'll often hear people say, I need a meeting, in the same tone they used to say, I need a drink. The problem isn't the meeting, it's misunderstanding what it's for. If we use support as a replacement for inner work instead of a tool to strengthen it, we never learn how to stand on our own. And that's what keeps so many people stuck. It's like trying to fix a leaky roof by putting a bucket underneath it. You might catch the water for a little while, but the real issue is the crack in the ceiling. Until you climb up and understand what's actually causing the leak, you'll be stuck emptying that same bucket over and over again. And here's the thing, alcohol isn't the only bucket. Even after we stop drinking, most of us just swap it out for something else. Food, relationships, work, validation, distraction. It's all the same pattern, just with a different label. Because when pain is misunderstood, the behavior is going to repeat. The moment we start asking why we feel restless, why we shut down, why we reach for something to numb out, that's when everything starts to shift. Because understanding is what breaks the pattern. You can't out-discipline your pain, but you can out-understand it. If we want to understand the problem, we have to rewind way back to that first drink. Not the first blackout or the first hangover, but that first moment alcohol really landed for you. The one that made you think, oh, this is it. For me, that first real buzz felt like relief. Felt like somebody turned down the volume on all the noise in my head. That constant fear of rejection, the overthinking, the pressure to perform, all of that finally went quiet. The first time I got drunk, I finally worked up the courage to ask out a girl I had a crush on since elementary school. Now she shot me down, but here's the best part. I didn't care. Rejection had no control over me anymore. I wasn't trapped in my head analyzing every word or wondering what people thought. I just laughed it off and moved on with my night. That was the moment I fell in love. Not with alcohol, but with peace. And that's what most people miss. The first drink isn't about the taste or the party. It's about what it gives you emotionally. For some, it's confidence. For others, it's connection. And for me, it was permission to relax and finally stop caring what everybody thinks. That first experience plants the seed for everything that follows. From that point on, every drink becomes an attempt to recreate the moment of finally feeling okay. But here's the problem. It never actually works the same way again. We spend years chasing that first sense of relief, even as it slips further and further away. It's like chasing a mirage in the desert. You see that shimmer in the distance, the memory of what alcohol used to do for you, and you keep walking towards it. But the closer you get, the more it disappears. Meanwhile, you're getting more exhausted, more dehydrated, and more lost. And if we're honest, that's exactly how most of us end up on the breadcrumb trail that leads back to relapse. Every breadcrumb is another attempt to feel what that first drink gave us, a break from the pain, the fear, and the loneliness. So when people ask, why do I keep doing this to myself? The real answer isn't because you love alcohol. It's because you love what alcohol temporarily gave you. And that's where the real healing begins. When you stop trying to chase that old feeling and start understanding what that feeling was trying to fix. Because the truth is, the thing you were chasing wasn't in the bottle. It was in you all along. You just didn't know how to access it without the drink. Once we start chasing that first feeling, something else begins to form. The stories we tell ourselves about why we drink and who we are without it. We all have them. I'm boring sober. I need alcohol to loosen up. Everybody drinks. I'll be an outsider if I don't. I just can't relax without it. When repeated long enough, these stories become the soundtrack of our lives. And the thing about repetition is, over time, belief starts to sound like truth. For me, after that first night of freedom, that night when I could finally laugh off rejection, I woke up the next morning feeling the complete opposite. All that confidence, that sense of peace, that I don't care what anybody thinks attitude, it was gone. And in its place was even more anxiety, more shame, and a deeper fear of being judged. That's when my story began to form. Alcohol gives me confidence. And once that belief took hold, every night out became less about fun and more about survival, about needing alcohol to feel like the version of myself I wanted to be. And here's the dangerous part. When those beliefs go unchallenged, they quietly start running our lives. They decide what invitations you accept, who you date, what opportunities you chase, and how you see yourself. You stop asking, is this true? And start assuming, this is just who I am. But those stories aren't facts. They're just unexamined thoughts that grew from pain. And until you understand where they came from, you'll keep living by them. That is why understanding is more powerful than willpower. Because when you understand the story, you could finally question it. You could pause and ask, wait, am I actually boring sober? Or am I just uncomfortable being fully seen without something to hide behind? Once you start challenging the story, the power it holds over you starts to dissolve. See, we can't heal what we keep protecting. And most of us protect our stories like they're armor. But in reality, they're just our cages. The day you start being curious instead of defensive, that's the day the walls will start to crack. And it's not just about drinking. These stories show up everywhere. They tell you you're not good enough to start over, that you don't deserve happiness, that people always leave, or that you're too broken to change. But every single one of those stories was written by pain, not truth. So when you hear these voices, don't try to silence them. Get curious about them. Ask, where did I learn this? What was I trying to protect myself from when I started believing it? Because the moment you understand your story, you stop living inside it. It is absolutely critical to understand this one thing. Relapse doesn't start the moment you take a drink. It starts way before that, long before the glass touches your lips. And it starts with a breadcrumb trail. You miss a morning routine that usually helps you keep grounded. You skip a meeting or stop journaling because you're too busy. You start isolating a little more, scrolling a little longer, and getting a little quieter. You tell yourself, I've got this. And before you realize it, you're halfway down a trail of tiny choices that all leads back to the same place. The same pain, the same escape, the same misunderstanding that you've been running from your whole life. Each breadcrumb is a small moment of disconnection. Disconnection from your habits, from your emotions, from your truth, and ultimately from yourself. That's why relapse isn't a single event. It's a buildup. It's like the tension before a storm. You could feel the air changing long before the rain hits, but most of us don't stop to pay attention. We just keep walking. Those breadcrumbs always lead back to the same beliefs we talked about earlier. The stories like alcohol gives me confidence or I'm better when I'm drinking. Because every time life gets uncomfortable, those old stories start whispering again. Remember how good you felt that first night? Remember how easy it was? You could be that version of yourself again. And the real problem is, the one that a lot of people in recovery want to try to avoid, there's truth in those whispers. For a moment, alcohol did make things easier. That first drink really did give me relief, but it's the same trap every time. The relief from that night, the peace, the freedom, it's always followed by the crash the next morning. The fear comes back stronger. The shame grows heavier. The confidence disappears. That's why understanding your breadcrumb trail matters. Because if you don't notice the trail forming, you'll keep following it. Not out of choice, but out of habit. Every skipped routine, every rationalized thought, every I'm fine is just another crumb on the path back to misunderstanding yourself. And the good news is, if you could learn to see it clearly, you could turn around before you even get lost. Understanding doesn't just stop relapse, it transforms it. When you could trace those breadcrumbs back to where they're really pointing to, the loneliness, the fear, the boredom, the disconnection, you stop reacting and you start responding. You stop running from the pain and you start learning from it. Because the truth is, every relapse, every setback, every spiral has a breadcrumb trail that leads back to an unmet need. And once you understand that, the whole game changes. You stop seeing relapse as a failure and you start seeing it as feedback, a signal that something deeper needs your attention. One of the biggest mistakes people make in recovery is thinking that the work ends when they stop drinking. But getting sober is just the beginning. It's like taking off a cast and realizing you still have to learn to walk again. Because the truth is, alcohol wasn't the only way we misunderstood ourselves. The same patterns that kept us drinking are still there. They just find new places to hide. Maybe you stopped drinking, but now you find yourself constantly seeking validation from other people. Or you dive into work so hard that being busy becomes your new high. Maybe you start chasing perfection, needing everything in your life to be just right. It's that same equation we talked about earlier. Pain plus misunderstanding equals repetition. If we don't understand our patterns, we trade one distraction for another. When I quit drinking, I thought the hardest part would be saying no to alcohol. But what I didn't expect was how loud my thoughts would get once I didn't have a way to turn the volume down. The anxiety, the fear of rejection, the self-doubt, they didn't just suddenly appear just because I stopped drinking. They just stopped being numb. That's when I realized that sobriety isn't about not drinking. It's about learning to understand yourself deeply enough that you don't need to drink. Because when you don't understand yourself, life feels like a constant reaction. You react to stress, you react to loneliness, you react to fear. And every reaction is just another breadcrumb leading back to that same place, that search for relief. But when you do understand yourself, when you can pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? What am I trying to avoid or control? That's when everything changes. Understanding creates a space between the trigger and the reaction. It turns chaos into clarity. This isn't just about staying sober. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about realizing that the same skills that keep you sober can also help you build better relationships, set new boundaries, and live with more peace. Because if you could understand yourself in moments that used to make you drink, the moments of rejection, fear, or loneliness, you could handle anything life throws your way. That's not just sobriety, my friends. That's freedom. Now, this isn't an easy process. When most people start digging into why they drink, they slip into judgment instead of understanding. The questions sound like, what's wrong with me? Or why can't I just get it together? But those questions don't lead to growth. They lead to shame. Shame says you're broken. Understanding says you're human. The goal isn't just to excuse the past, it's to finally see it clearly. Because when you're busy judging yourself, you can't learn from yourself. It's like trying to drive while staring into the rearview mirror. You're too focused on the crash behind you to notice where you're going. I used to wake up after nights of drinking and drowned in judgment. I'd replay every mistake, every stupid comment, every moment I embarrassed myself. But even after I got sober, that same judgment stuck around, just with new targets. Now it says things like, you should be further along. Normal people don't struggle with stuff like this. Everyone else seems to have their life together. Why am I still figuring mine out? That's the trap. We stop drinking, but we keep abusing ourselves. We remove the alcohol, but keep the voice that drove us to it. True change happens the moment you trade judgment for curiosity. Instead of saying, why am I like this? Ask, what pain am I trying to avoid? Instead of, I can't believe I messed up again, try asking, what need was I trying to meet? Instead of saying, what's wrong with me? Ask, what happened to me? That's how you start connecting the dots instead of collecting guilt. That's how you turn relapse or any setback into insight. Remember that night I talked about earlier when rejection didn't bother me because I was drunk? Understanding shows me now that the issue was never confidence. It was fear. Alcohol didn't give me courage. It silenced my fear for a few hours. Judgment would have said, you're weak for needing this. Understanding says, you're doing the best you could with the tools you had. And here's the thing. Once you understand, you gain the power to choose new tools. You could build confidence that lasts, connection that's real, and peace that isn't borrowed. Judgment keeps you stuck in the story. Understanding lets you rewrite it. So the next time you feel yourself spiraling, try this simple pause. Take a breath and say, I'm not judging, I'm learning. That one shift can change the entire trajectory of your day, your recovery, and even your life. Sobriety has a way of showing you everything you used to hide from. It's like suddenly turning on the lights in a room you've lived in for years. At first, it's blinding, it's uncomfortable, and it's definitely painful because when the distractions are gone, all that's left is you. That's what I mean when I say sobriety is a mirror. It reflects back every part of you that alcohol used to blur out. The pain you buried, the loneliness you ignored, the shame you tried to drink away, and the fear that you never wanted to name. And for a lot of people, that's where the real panic hits. They think, if this is how sobriety feels, I'm out. Because what they're seeing isn't pretty. It's raw, it's vulnerable, but it's also real. That mirror's where the healing begins, only if you're willing to look. When I first got sober, I thought the goal was to rebuild the confident version of me when I was drinking. But over time, I realized something. That version of me wasn't confidence. It was camouflage. Alcohol didn't make me confident. It just made me care less about the truth. And the truth was I was terrified of rejection, desperate to belong, and constantly measuring my worth by how other people saw me. Sobriety held the mirror up and said, here's what's really going on. And at first, I hated it. But eventually, I started to understand that mirror wasn't trying to shame me. It was there to free me. Because when you stop running from your reflection, you finally get to meet the person you've always been underneath it all. And it's not that you discover a brand new you. It's that you finally see the version that's been waiting for you to come home. That's what people mean when they talk about finding peace in sobriety. It's not about never feeling pain again. It's about learning to stand in front of that mirror, flaws, fears, and all, and say, I'm not running anymore. So if sobriety feels uncomfortable right now, that's not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that you're doing it right. Because discomfort is the mirror showing you where healing still needs to happen. Don't turn away. Don't break the mirror. Just look. You can't change what you won't face, but the moment you face it, you will start to change. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this episode, it's this. You can't solve a problem you don't understand. When we stop drinking, we think the hard part is over, but the truth is, quitting is just the first step. Understanding is what keeps you free. Because when you finally understand your patterns, you stop seeing yourself as broken. When you understand your emotions, you stop running from them. And when you understand your pain, you stop trying to numb it and you start healing it. That's what freedom looks like. Not perfection, not constant happiness, just peace. The kind that comes from finally knowing yourself deeply enough to stop fighting the wrong battle. Every relapse, every struggle, every moment of discomfort, they all have something to teach you only if you're willing to listen. The goal isn't to avoid them forever. It's to learn what they're trying to tell you. So this week, I want to challenge you to do something simple, but not easy. When you feel triggered, restless, or uncomfortable, pause and ask yourself this one question. What's really happening underneath this? Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's that same old belief whispering that you're not enough. Whatever it is, don't run from it. Get curious. Because the more you understand it, the less control it has over you. You don't need to be perfect to stay sober. You just need to keep learning yourself. Because understanding, not control, not fear, not willpower, is what sets you free. And understanding isn't just a one-time event. It's something we keep doing. Every challenge, every uncomfortable moment is just another invitation to look a little deeper. And when we do, life will start to make a lot more sense. Until next time, my friends, thank you so much for listening and keep living sober and happy.
Thanks for listening to the Sober and Happy podcast with Tim Phillips. If today's episode connected with you, share it with someone who needs it. You can follow Tim on social at I Am Sober and Happy and visit soberandhappy.com for tools, motivation, and more episodes. Remember, quitting drinking is just the beginning. The real goal is learning to love yourself and love your life. This has been the Sober and Happy podcast. See you next time.